How's it going, guys? I service all kinds of equipment here at Eliminator Performance. You know, lawnmowers, weed eaters, chainsaws, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't film just because, well, it's pretty repetitive. You know, if I'm doing the same lawnmower, Craftsman or a Briggs & Stratton engine, where the carburetor's the same and it's just a different sticker on the top of it, then, you know, it kind of gets repetitive. So, you know, I bring out my my camera here when I'm pretty greasy and there's something interesting that I wanted to show you guys. And this right here is one of those things. So this is a mobile generator. It's got a Honda GX200. You guys can see there, really nice engine. And you guys can see all those little white pieces there. That came from the spark plug. So we got a NGK BP R6ES right there. That's what it's supposed to look like. And this one had some cracked porcelain. I've never actually seen this on a machine before, but you know, I guess over time that stuff can get brittle, and I just went and took the socket to it to take it out, and I noticed that a couple little white pieces fell off of it. So we got a new one over here we're going to be putting on, and that should take care of that issue. But what I did want to show you guys was this side of it. This is a Burco Mobile Chapter technology. It's a mobile welder. So basically you fire up the engine, you stick your two leads in here, your negative, your positive, and this is for shielded metal arc welding. So this is the stick welding. So you got your tong, and then you'll have your rod coming out of it. And basically, guys, this is what you'd have at you know, a local construction site and whatnot. But it's got this MOSA Power Optimizer made in Italy sticker. So I'm guessing that, you know, this whole segment of the welder here is made in Italy, whereas, you know, they just go and get one of the most reliable engines ever and bolt it onto the back. They are reliable, guys, but after a while your carburetors get dirty and you know, you got problems with them. So we're gonna have to clean this up, and then we should be able to get this thing fired up and warmed up so we can change the oil. And here's a prime example of what I was talking about. So we got the carb upside down. The float here, that looks pretty clean. I've taken the bottom off of the shutoff valve there. I guess you can call that the petcock. That's got some debris in it too. Here's our sediment bowl, and you guys can clearly see quite a bit of debris in the bottom. And if you noticed before, I also have the fuel tank taken off, so I got that outside. I drained it and I rinsed it out with some water, and I'm just drying it out in the sun right now because it was quite filled with debris, and I'm gonna say it was really fine stuff, you know, stuff like that gets into the tank, just dust and just basic stuff you'll find on any construction site. So I'm going to be putting this into my ultrasonic cleaner, getting it all cleaned up. This thing, it ran rough, the customer said, so we're gonna get it running nice and smooth for him. Here's a little shot of the tank. So we got her all cleaned up now. Fuel filter in there. It's inside the tank. That's all clean. We got the carburetor here. You guys can see from what it looked like to what it looks like now. Nice and clean. I haven't bolted the fuel tank up yet, but I've ran the fuel line. So that runs from the tank up there through here, through this little plastic piece here. I'm going to get the carburetor back on and get this thing back together. Also, just a little trick, guys. Take a little bit of nickel anti-seize and put it onto your carburetor studs there, because steel to aluminum, normally there's a little bit of corrosion that occurs. And I've had issues with these GX model Hondas where the only, like, you know, bad design flaw is that they never put anti-seize on these studs, because I've had them before, guys, where the carburetors here, the aluminum carbs, have seized and corroded to the steel metal carburetor studs. So a little bit of nickel anti-seize, you guys can see it right there, goes a long way, guys. Don't forget to hook up your fuel line clamp right there, and also don't forget to hook up this outer gasket here. And if you guys don't know how that lines up, just take a look at it and you'll see the holes on the gasket here line up with the holes on the carburetor. Next up, we got to get our bolt for our fuel tank in before we put our spark plug back in, because if the spark plug's in, you won't actually be able to get at that bolt there, because I like to use an extension so that, you know, I'm not doing like little 1/8 turns here. I like to have the extension so that I can do a full turn, you know, way out here. And for the majority of all these nuts and bolts, guys, we're going to be using a 10mm socket. Next up, we're going to hook up our linkage, and to do that, you just got to rotate this plastic piece as far back like that as you can, and then just give this little linkage here a push back that way, and it should clip right into place. You're just trying to line it up, guys, with the slot you guys see right in there. And once you get it into the right spot, it'll just drop in nicely like it is. Then go ahead and take your spring and hook it up into this little hole right there. Okay, so now that we got the fuel tank bolted up and the carb ready to go, so the next thing we're going to do now is put the spark plug in and then get the outer plastic shroud that goes over top of this carburetor hooked up. And again, we're going to be using a BPR6ES NGK spark plug for this Honda GX200. Okay, so we got a little issue here. I went to put the new spark plug in, and that's as far as it's going. I'm not sure if you guys can see that clearly or not. Trying to get it to focus, but that right there, guys, is the farthest I can get it in. I even put a little bit of nickel anti-seize on it, but I think what happened, because I showed you guys that broken porcelain on the old spark plug that we took out, I think what's happened is somebody's went in there and over tightened the old spark plug. It cracked the porcelain, and they kind of just put the cap, you know, back on, and like, you know, nobody really noticed, and they left it like that. And I think that they've stripped the threads. Believe it or not, it actually will go in almost to where it is now just by hand. Then you got to start tightening it up with the ratchet, but the problem is I can't get that all the way in. So what I'm going to have to do is we're going to pull that spark plug out. I'm going to stuff a rag in there, and then we're going to run a metric tap once I find out what tap to run to match those threads. And I'm going to try to tap those threads to clean them up a bit, because there are usable threads in there. Like I said, it goes in up until that point, and it's kind of hard for you guys to see because we're on an angle here. But that is about maybe a 1/4 inch more to go. So if I look on this spark plug here, you guys can see that I'm going to say about 3/4 of those threads are in, and we got about 1/4 of the threads left that aren't going in due to the threads on the actual engine block itself being stripped at the bottom. Now that's weird, because normally if you get stripped threads, all the threads are stripped. But what I've found just from you know, putting it in by hand there and tightening it up to the point where we're at is it seems like only the bottom threads of the engine block for the spark plug hole are stripped. So we should be able to salvage this and save it by putting a tap through it and just cleaning up the threads versus drilling it out and installing a helicoil, which would then be, you know, more work, and well, we might not need to go that far, but if we do, I'll get a video of it. Okay, so I went and picked up a thread chaser. This is Napa Service Tools 14mm and 18mm spark plug opening thread chaser. So this isn't a tap, guys. This is just a thread chaser, and it'll clean out the threads. Again, like I said, here's your old spark plug. I think what happened is somebody tightened it up too much. As we can see, the porcelain's cracked. I have my replacement spark plug here that you guys can see. I put a little bit of nickel anti-seize onto it, and I tried to tighten it up, and well, you guys can see that it got to right about there. So it got about 2/3 down, and we're just having a little bit of problem with the threads on the engine that are farther down, and it does look pretty nasty in there. So I'm going to run that through, but before I do that, I'm going to take just a little blue shop towel, maybe put it in there just to make sure that no debris gets inside of the cylinder, and I'm going to run this thread chaser through to clean up these threads. And to do this, it's pretty straightforward, guys. You take that, you thread it in. I just threaded this in by hand. It's starting to get a little tight now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a socket onto a ratchet. I'm going to put it over top of this, and then I'm going to tighten it maybe about a 1/4 turn, and then I'm going to back it off a 1/2 turn, and then I'm going to go maybe another 1/2 turn, and then back it off a 1/4 turn, and then keep working it like that so that if there is any debris, it works it out just like I would if I was using a tap. Okay, so I'm experiencing the same issue. We're getting down to the same spot that we did before, and it's starting to get pretty tight now. So again, I'm going to put this to loosen, and we're going to back this off a few turns here. Then we're going to go like that, and we're going to start working it back in. And as soon as it starts to get tight like that, I'm going to back it off, just like you would if you were tapping a hole, guys. And then same thing. And now I can feel it starting to get a little bit easier as I go down. Farther and farther, the more I go, it's getting easier and easier. So this should be cleaning out the threads, and we're just going to keep doing this, guys. Okay, so now we're at the point where our thread chaser is pretty much bottomed out. So I'm going to remove it with the ratchet. We're going to inspect the threads, and then we're going to try and install our spark plug and see if it threads in all the way. Okay, so I got the thread chaser over here on the workbench, and well, you guys can see there is a little bit of debris on those threads here. So I'm thinking that you know, just a little bit of nasty stuff got into the threads, and you know, wasn't allowing us to get that spark plug all the way down. But now it should, in theory, because these threads are about the same length here, and we were able to bottom this out. So now we should be able to install this spark plug and not have any issues. Okay, so I ended up using a little bit of PB Blaster. Basically that's just like your average lubricant, but it's the good kind. And I ran the thread chaser through again one more time just before putting the spark plug in, just to make sure that the threads are clean. And you guys can see there's even more debris now. Little bits of aluminum and probably some carbon in there as well. I did clean this off before I ran it through a second time, but now we can take a look at the threads on the actual engine block, and you guys can see they look a lot cleaner. So here's what the threads look like now. You guys can see we were probably getting hung up right at the back there, down on the bottom. Not sure if I'm going to be able to get a clear shot if I zoom in, but that's what we were dealing with. Cleaned it out pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to grab the spark plug and try to put it in after I clean up some of this just little aluminum shavings. And there you have it, guys. So maybe some dirty threads, maybe a little bit of carbon built up. Maybe the guy that worked on it before me over tightened it, who knows. But that thread chaser worked out perfectly. So you guys can see that the crush washer, that is a crush washer, and when you tighten that down, it is supposed to crush. And that's seated all the way down now. So this thing is ready to go back together. Basically, I just got to plug this in, take my tape off, put that plastic shroud on, hook up the overhead valve breather tube to the air box, get the air filter on, put some fresh fuel into it, and I should be able to fire it up. Then I can adjust the jet on the side of the carburetor. And on this model, if you got to make any adjustments, it is right there. That's just about maybe a quarter turn, half turn model. You guys can file the nub off of there if you want, so you can get even more adjustment out of it. But this thing shouldn't need it as long as the carburetor's clean, which I ran it through my ultrasonic cleaner with some of that 701 Indo industrial strength degreaser. That stuff works awesome. So now, once I get this thing running, I'll warm it up. I'll change the oil with some fresh 10W30. I think this model takes 600 milliliters. Okay, so we purchased this today for $8.99 Canadian. I think it was regular like $14.99. So for $9, guys, I was able to finish a job that I can charge out for I don't know, $75. So this tool basically has already paid for itself, and the next time that I need it, I got it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off all of the debris on those threads, put a little bit of lubricant, maybe some WD-40 on it, put it back into this little package here and put it into my specialty tools drawer for the next time that I need it. Okay, so first thing we're going to do to put this back together is take our little end piece here that goes over the carburetor. We're going to slide that on. It's pretty simple. Now it's got a couple slots here, so you guys are going to have to be aware of that for the choke. So what you're going to want to do is just have your choke lever, the gray one up top, and your petcock fuel valve. You're going to want to have them in the front position just like this, and then this thing, guys, should slip right over top. And just to note here, because this is important, this is an overhead valve, so you do have an overhead valve breather tube right there, and you guys probably noticed all of the oil and grease built up around the overhead valve here. So your overhead valve tube vents into your airbox, and what happens, guys, is if you put too much oil into your machine, oil will actually start coming out of that tube, and it'll go into your airbox, and you guys can see there's all sorts of oil in here, and it's kind of dripped out onto my hand. I'm going to clean this up, and basically what's going to happen is you guys are going to be sucking oil from your engine into your airbox, into your carburetor, and then you're going to be burning it through. The problem with that is that it significantly shortens the time that your carburetor is going to work properly, because you're sucking oil through a carburetor that's only designed for fuel and air. So you're going to dirty up your jets, you're going to clog your holes a lot easier, and you're going to have problems. So you guys want to make sure that you're not running too much oil on your machines. And again, you guys are just going to want to line that up with the studs and your choke and your fuel valve, and that'll push right on. So now what I'm going to do is hook up that overhead valve breather tube, get the 10 mil nuts onto the top of that, and the one 10 mil bolt that goes right there into that hole. And that's those little guys right there. And then you guys are going to want to take it. Now this will fall over like that because there is no support on that right side. So what you guys want to do is just line it up with that little tab. Then go ahead and get your air filter, put it on top of that, and then secure it with your wing nut. So it's going to look a little something like that. And then go ahead and get your top cover over top of that with your second wing nut. And I just wanted to take the time to show you guys. I have my ultrasonic cleaner off. I changed this liquid here. It's a little bit of hot water and some of that industrial strength degreaser that I use. But I cleaned this before I ended up cleaning that carb on that mobile welder there. And you guys can see after just one carb clean, that's all the stuff that came out of that one carb. So I just got my little LED light here, and like you guys can see, there's some bigger chunks off to the side there, and then most of it's just really fine dust. So this is the stuff that you suck through your air filter, guys. This is, again, the importance of running an air filter, because you know, you're going to be sucking dirt and debris and all sorts of sand and everything else, especially if you're have a mobile welder, you're at a construction site where a lot of trucks are being driven around. You got these gasoline engines that are, they need air, and they're sucking all this dust through the air filter. And if you guys don't change your air filters, all of that stuff ends up getting into your carburetor. And then after it passes through your carburetor and it dirties your carburetor, it ends up getting into your engine. And stuff like this, guys, over time can score the walls of your piston and wear out your piston rings, and you'll have less and less compression every time you use it. For every minute that you're running that machine, and it's sucking this stuff into the cylinder. So again, I just wanted to take the time to show you guys that, but I'm going to clean this out before I do my next carburetor clean. So I'm going to show you guys the importance of running a clean air filter and how a dirty air filter can actually prevent your machine from running altogether. Like I said, that's the importance of running a clean air filter. As soon as I put that air filter on, boy, that thing bogged right out as if you were putting the choke on. If you're skipping your oil changes and you're not putting new air filters on, your machines not only are not going to run the way they're supposed to, but they're not going to last as long. Basically, by doing that stuff, guys, you're going to dramatically increase the life of your machine. Well, that's it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, think about leaving me a thumbs up. You can click here to subscribe, and you can click over here for one of my previous videos. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.